Hi everybody, this is chapter 8, layer 2 and 3 of network security devices or intrusion detection system. This is a continuation of the previous chapter that we talked about. The previous chapter we talked about layer 1, the perimeter layer security devices, which was the firewall. Now, as a continuation to the security devices, we are looking at layer 2 and 3 of the defense of depth security model. Layer 2 and 3, they are related to the internal network and the host layer. And as very important security devices associated to this layer is going to be the intrusion detection system, or the IDS. So the topic objectives include, we need to talk about the intrusion detection in general. What is the intrusion detection, and define it, and define the characteristics of the intrusion detection. And as we move on, we will then talk about the different devices that are available related to the intrusion detection systems, and we will talk about the two main types of the intrusion detection system, that is the network-based intrusion detection system and the host-based intrusion detection system. Now, for those two types, of course, they could be knowledge-based or they could be statistical-based intrusion detection system. And so, to introduce you to the topic, as we all know, the administrators, the information system professionals, they need to keep monitoring their network, their infrastructure for intrusions. And this, of course, has to be by utilizing certain log files on a daily basis to check those log files to see if there is any malicious activities. Now, before a while, like 20 years ago or more, the issue of reacting to a suspicious activity was not really a major. In other words, the system administrators, they had the time in order for them to react if there was an intrusion was detected. Now, because we are talking about we are all linked together, the internet, the different type of systems that are linked together. Now we need better method in order for us to make sure that there is going to be a good response to any intrusion. That's why the real-time solution has to exist in terms of intrusion, and this will have to be implemented so that a reaction to any malicious activity is taking place immediately. Now, the volume, of course, of activity on network today has exceeded what was 20 years ago. And of course, that in order for us to evaluate the log files of a huge amount of data that is being captured on the network or in the environment, it will take us a very long time in order to analyze if there is an intrusion. That's why the need has the need was created in order to come up with some kind of automated process in order for us to evaluate all the different log files, all the different captured data, to check if there is any intrusion on the system. And that's where the intrusion detection system were born in order to facilitate the automation of evaluation of the different security breaches or threats on the system. Now, to define the intrusion in general terms, it is an unauthorized attempt or achievement to access, alter, or render unavailable or destroy information on the system or the system itself. So, in simple form, it is somebody is trying to attack the system. That's basically what is an intrusion. Intrusion is somebody is intruding into our system or into our environment, and for the purpose of altering the data, or for the purpose of adding different content, or for the purpose of modifying or bringing down the infrastructure. Now, the intention could be again from the insiders or the outsiders. Now, if it is from the outsider, we call it intrusion. Now, if it's from the insider, from the internal network, then we call it a misuse, and those terms has to be clearly identified. Now, intrusion detection, of course, is the art of detecting unauthorized inappropriate anomalous activity. Now, the art of intrusion detection has been practiced, of course, by system administrators for years. Of course, this was emerged recently also to become a very hot area because of the marketing, because of the different vendors who are supplying IDS system or intrusion detection systems. So the purpose of the IDS is to identify attacks that are in progress that didn't happen yet. So the intrusion detection is intelligent. It is not after the fact. It is before the fact, before the intrusion is being or before a hacker attempt is before making the hacker attempt is successful, is that we need to identify those attacks that are in progress. Okay, so we can generate real-time alerts and launch countermeasures to reconfigure probably the router or the firewall in order to prevent those attacks from happening. Now we go to the second topic of this chapter, is that now we want to talk about the different devices that are available for the intrusion detection system. Now, intrusion detection systems, the first type of intrusion detection system is going to be the network-based intrusion detection system. The second type, of course, is going to be the host-based intrusion detection system. Now, as we talk about these two types, the function of the intrusion detection system could be either of a knowledge-based intrusion detection system or of